Imagine waking up, the very first action of the day. A hand reaches out in the quiet dark, grabs a small glass rectangle, and instantly the mind is flooded with the demands, emergencies, and trivialities of the outside world. The screen glows, 10 unread messages await. A scattered, disjointed list of obligations begins to form. A fleeting sense of anxiety takes root in the chest, a quiet tightening that will remain there for the rest of the day. This is how the morning begins, a fragmented hum, a low level of stress that never quite dissipates. The attention is immediately divided, sliced into increasingly thin slivers, distributed among dozens of rapidly shifting targets. Now hold that image. Move away from that glowing screen. Travel to a converted barn in the Wisconsin farm country. The barn doors are wide open. The immense heat of an industrial forge pushes against the cool morning air. A master craftsman stands before an anvil. He is attempting to recreate an ancient Viking-era sword, utilizing a technique for smelting crucible steel that is over 1,500 years old. He heats a small, dense ingot of pure metal. He hits it with a heavy hammer. He turns it. He hits it again. He places it carefully back into the roaring flames. He repeats this precise sequence for 8 uninterrupted hours. 8 solid hours of careful, controlled strikes. If his concentration slips for a single second, if his mind wanders to a different topic, the metal will crack. The entire effort will be completely ruined. But look closely at his face. There is no anxiety. There is no fragmented hum. There is only intense, unbroken appreciation. He eventually plunges the red-hot blade into a pipe filled with oil to cool it. Residual heat ignites the fuel, and sudden flames erupt. He lifts the burning sword above his head, and his admiration is entirely palpable. He will tell anyone watching that this is the most complicated thing he knows how to make. He does not need a sword, but he is driven by the challenge. Between these 2 mornings, there is a vast ocean of human experience. One morning is defined by a frantic, shallow skimming over the surface of life. The other morning is defined by a deep, profound plunge into a single, demanding task. There is a tension here. Modern culture strongly suggests that checking off dozens of small tasks, answering rapid-fire messages, and remaining constantly available makes us productive, connected, and important. We are led to believe that deep, solitary concentration is isolating or excessively difficult, and that true relaxation means putting our feet up and doing nothing at all. Yet the person staring at the glowing screen feels drained, irritable, and vaguely empty. The person swinging a heavy hammer for 8 hours feels deeply satisfied, calm, and firmly anchored in the world. How does a grueling, high-stakes physical task create profound peace, while a series of minor, low-stakes digital tasks creates chronic panic? The answer is not just about time management or productivity hacks. The answer lies in the very architecture of the human brain. It lies in how attention physically constructs reality. We build a life out of whatever we choose to look at. And right now, many of us are choosing to look at a chaotic, fragmented world, wondering why we feel so incredibly lost. Welcome. Today, we are exploring the profound connection between where we place our focus and the meaning we extract from our lives. We are looking at the neurological and psychological realities of attention. This is a journey into understanding why a workday, driven by the shallow hum of constant communication, leads to a fragmented, stressed existence, and why a life spent focused on deep, difficult tasks generates a lasting sense of satisfaction. By the end of our time together, you will understand how your brain builds your worldview based entirely on what you pay attention to. You will begin to recognize the hidden emotional costs of living in a state of continuous partial attention. You will see how the very structure of shallow tasks guarantees a feeling of emptiness, no matter how much is actually accomplished. More importantly, you will understand how to access a completely different state of being. You will have concrete ways to notice the quality of your attention in the coming week and to deliberately shift it toward the kind of deep engagement that makes life feel inherently worthwhile. This is not about getting more work done. This is about ensuring the mind is inhabiting a world that is actually worth living in. Let us begin at the level of the brain itself. To understand how attention shapes reality, we must look at a truly striking example. Consider the experience of a science writer who, on an otherwise ordinary afternoon, walked out of a hospital clinic with a terrifying diagnosis. It was cancer, and it was a particularly advanced, aggressive kind. The medical treatment that lay ahead was going to be exhausting, painful, and terrible. In that exact moment, standing outside the hospital, a sudden and strong intuition formed. This disease wanted to monopolize all available attention, but it was entirely possible to choose differently. It was possible to focus on life instead. This writer decided to deliberately manage her attention throughout the grueling cancer treatment. She chose to focus on a good movie, a quiet walk, or a perfectly mixed evening martini. The circumstances of her life during this period were objectively terrible. She should have been mired in total fear and paralyzing pity. Yet, because she carefully protected her attention, she noticed that her daily life remained quite pleasant. This sounds simple, but it changes more than it first appears to. We tend to place a massive amount of emphasis on our external circumstances. We assume that what happens to us determines how we feel. From this perspective, the small-scale details of how we spend our day are not that important because the only things that truly matter are the large-scale outcomes. We think we will be happy if we get a promotion, if we move to a nicer apartment, or if we finally resolve a lingering financial issue. But decades of neurological research completely contradict this understanding. Our brains construct our worldview based exclusively on what we pay attention to. If you focus on a terrible medical diagnosis, your entire reality becomes unhappy and dark. If you focus instead on a pleasant evening walk, your reality becomes pleasant. The objective circumstances in both scenarios are exactly the same. The only variable is attention. Who you are, what you think, how you feel, and what you love is nothing more than the sum total of what you focus on. Scientists can actually watch this effect happen inside the brain. In studies using brain scanners, researchers look at the amygdala, a center of emotion. When young people are shown both positive and negative imagery, their amygdala fires with intense activity for both types of pictures. But when elderly subjects are shown the exact same images, their amygdala only fires for the positive ones. The older individuals have quite literally trained their prefrontal cortex to inhibit the emotional response to negative stimuli. They are not happier because their lives are objectively easier. They are happier because they have rewired their brains to ignore the negative and savor the positive. They improve their entire world without changing a single concrete thing about it. Now here is where it gets interesting. Let us apply this neurological reality to our daily work and our typical habits. Consider the mental world that is constructed when significant time is dedicated to deep, demanding endeavors. There is a gravity and a sense of absolute importance inherent in deep work. Whether someone is smithing an iron sword or writing a complex computer algorithm, the mind is anchored. If you spend enough time in this state of deep concentration, your brain will automatically understand your world as being rich in meaning and importance. But there is a hidden, equally important benefit to cultivating intense attention. Intense concentration completely hijacks the attention apparatus. It prevents the brain from noticing the many smaller, less pleasant things that unavoidably populate our lives. When the mind is stretched to its absolute limit, there is zero processing power left over to worry about irrelevant problems, petty slights, or vague anxieties. Think about what happens when this intense concentration is abandoned in favor of constant connectivity. The modern knowledge worker faces a devastatingly appealing buffet of distraction. If you allow your attention to constantly shift to an inbox or a messaging app, what exactly are you focusing on? You are looking at a stream of urgent requests, vague complaints, scheduling conflicts, minor crises, and trivial updates. If the brain constructs its reality from the things it focuses on, what kind of reality is being built by an inbox? It is a reality dominated by stress, irritation, frustration, and triviality. Even if colleagues are genial and the interactions are mostly polite, the very act of rapidly shifting attention across dozens of shallow concerns guarantees that the mind will perceive the world as chaotic and draining. A workday driven by the shallow hum of rapid communication is guaranteed to be an upsetting day, neurologically speaking. The idle mind naturally drifts toward what is wrong. When focus is lost, the brain fixates on the negative. Choosing to live in a state of deep focus is not a matter of workplace efficiency. It is the only way to leverage the complex machinery of the human brain to maximize the meaning and satisfaction we associate with our actual lives. Let us slow down for a second and look at this from a completely different angle. Beyond the structure of the brain, there is the deeply fascinating psychology of human experience. We have to examine a groundbreaking approach to understanding how people actually feel as they move through their day. In the early 1980s, psychologists invented a new technique called the experience sampling method. Instead of bringing people into a laboratory and asking them to remember how they felt the previous week, researchers gave subjects pagers. These pagers would beep at completely random intervals throughout the day. When the beep sounded, the subjects had to immediately record exactly what they were doing and exactly how they were feeling at that precise moment. This method provided unprecedented, perfectly accurate insight into the daily rhythms of human emotion. The results were completely counterintuitive. Most people assume that relaxation makes them happy. The dream is to work less and spend more time lying in a hammock. But the actual data revealed that people have this entirely backward. The pagers showed that people were consistently happier at work than they were during their free time. This sounds absurd on the surface, but the underlying mechanics explain it perfectly. Jobs have built-in goals, clear feedback rules, and specific challenges. These structures naturally encourage a person to become completely involved, to concentrate, and to lose all track of time. Free time, on the other hand, is totally unstructured. It requires a massive amount of effort to be shaped into something that can actually be enjoyed. Left to its own devices, unstructured free time often devolves into anxious rumination or passive, low-quality entertainment. The best moments in human experience usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to its absolute limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something profoundly difficult and worthwhile. This state of total immersion is called flow. Deep, concentrated work is the perfect engine for generating this flow state. It requires stretching the mind, blocking out the noise, and losing oneself in an activity. Decades of research confirm that the more frequently a person experiences this state of flow, the higher their overall life satisfaction will be. There is a profound psychological argument in favor of depth. The mere act of going deep actively orders human consciousness in a way that makes life feel fundamentally worthwhile. It organizes the mind. It banishes the chaotic, stressful hum of the shallow world. Human beings are quite literally at their best when they are completely absorbed in something difficult. To bring this topic fully into ordinary life, let us make this concrete. We need to look at how this tension actually plays out in our daily routines. We need to observe the real consequences of choosing the shallow over the deep. Consider a typical professional sitting in an open-plan office. The computer monitor is divided into multiple windows. A spreadsheet occupies the center, but the edges of the screen are dominated by an email inbox and a team messaging application. Every 3 minutes, a tiny notification slides into view. The worker glances at it. It is a minor question from a colleague. The worker types a quick reply. Attention returns to the spreadsheet. A minute later, the phone screen lights up on the desk. It is an alert from a news application. The worker reads the headline. Attention returns to the spreadsheet. On the surface, this looks like normal, modern productivity. But beneath the surface, the worker's brain is suffering from severe attention residue. Every single time focus shifts away from the difficult spreadsheet and toward a shallow notification, a thick residue of attention remains stuck on the interruption. By the end of the day, the worker is totally exhausted. Nothing of real value was created, yet the brain feels as though it has run a marathon. The resulting emotion is a hollow, irritable fatigue. Consider a parent returning home from work. The physical body is in the living room, sitting on the floor with a young child. The child is attempting to build a complicated tower out of wooden blocks. But the parent has a phone in hand, continuously refreshing a social media feed. The parent occasionally looks up and offers a generic word of encouragement. "That looks great," the parent says, before looking back down at the screen. The parent believes they are relaxing after a hard day, while simultaneously spending time with the family. The reality is that the brain is trapped in a shallow, fragmented state. The mind is processing distant political arguments, vacation photos of distant acquaintances, and targeted advertisements, all while attempting to monitor a child. The result is a total absence of flow. The child feels the lack of presence. The parent feels a vague underlying guilt and a lingering sense of disconnection. The opportunity for a deeply meaningful, focused interaction is completely lost to the shallow hum. Think about what happens when a creative professional tries to do their work. A graphic designer sits down to create a totally new visual concept. This is a task that requires intense, unbroken imagination. But the designer leaves the email application open in the background. The fear of missing an urgent client request drives a constant, anxious checking behavior. Every single time the designer begins to fall into a state of deep, creative flow, the urge to check the inbox disrupts the process. The design that eventually emerges is safe, generic, and uninspired. It lacks the magic that only comes from deep, unbroken immersion. The designer finishes the day feeling like an imposter, wondering where the creative spark went, completely unaware that the constant context switching physically prevented the brain from accessing its highest cognitive abilities. Consider a university student attempting to study for a crucial final exam. The textbook is open on the desk, but a laptop is also open, playing a video in the corner of the screen. A phone is vibrating every few minutes with messages from a group chat. The student reads the same paragraph 4 times without comprehending a single word. The neural circuits required to master complex information can only be strengthened through intense, isolated focus. By attempting to learn while entirely distracted, the student is firing too many unrelated neural circuits simultaneously. The brain cannot consolidate the information. The student eventually closes the book, feeling stupid and defeated, falsely believing that the material is simply too hard. The truth is that the material is completely accessible, but the method of fractured attention made learning biologically impossible. Finally, consider the experience of a typical evening. The workday is over. The dinner dishes are washed. The time has come to relax. But because the brain is so deeply accustomed to rapid, shallow stimulation, the prospect of reading a challenging book or engaging in a deep conversation feels physically uncomfortable. The individual collapses onto a couch and begins to scroll endlessly through a video application. Hours pass in a hypnotic, semi-conscious state. When it is finally time to sleep, the mind feels strangely wired and incredibly empty. The free time was not restorative. It was simply a continuation of the same shallow fragmentation that dominated the workday, only packaged as entertainment. These scenarios show the lived consequences of allowing attention to be endlessly divided. When we live in the shallows, we feel stressed, uncreative, disconnected, and perpetually exhausted. The alternative is not simply to turn off the phone for 10 minutes. The alternative is to systematically cultivate the ability to go completely deep. Let us zoom out from individual behavior. What does this profound loss of depth suggest about the modern world? We have to look at the broader human pattern. Our culture currently believes that any behavior related to the internet or constant connectivity is automatically good, innovative, and necessary. We have elevated digital distraction into an absolute ideology. If someone refuses to use social media or refuses to answer emails immediately, they are viewed with deep suspicion. We have created a world that actively punishes depth and rewards visible, frantic busyness. But this has massive implications for how we find meaning in a secular age. Philosophers have noted that throughout history, human beings found meaning through a sense of the sacred. The world used to be seen as shining with inherent significance. As history progressed and society moved past absolute rulers and old dogmas, the responsibility for finding meaning was placed entirely on the individual. We are now tasked with deciding what matters and what does not. This is a crushing burden. It often leads to a creeping nihilism, a terrible feeling that everything is arbitrary and nothing truly matters. How do we restore a sense of sacredness and meaning without returning to the past? The answer lies in craftsmanship. Think back to the wheelwright, an old profession dedicated to shaping wooden wagon wheels. The master woodworker looks at a piece of raw timber. The wood has its own specific grain, its own distinct personality, its own subtle virtues. The craftsman does not arbitrarily invent the value of the wood. The craftsman's job is simply to discover the meaning and the quality that is already there. This intimate relationship with the material pulls the craftsman out of isolation and connects the mind to something ordered, real, and profoundly meaningful. This is the exact same phenomenon we saw with the blacksmith forging the Viking sword. The intense, deep focus required to manipulate the material reveals a glimpse of something sacred. The meaning is not generated by the ego. The meaning is discovered through the act of total, unbroken attention. This deep sense of meaning is not limited to physical materials. A computer programmer writing incredibly elegant code can experience the exact same profound connection. Beautiful code is short, concise, and perfectly structured. It is like writing a poem. The worker who cuts mere stones must always be envisioning the cathedral. When a knowledge worker gives their mind something truly meaningful to do and surrenders entirely to the depth of the task, they tap into the same ancient vein of satisfaction. They step out of the frantic, meaningless void of the internet and into a space of intense, quiet reverence. The deep life is not just economically valuable, it is the best kind of life there is. We have covered immense ground today. We have looked at how the brain uses attention to literally construct the world. We have seen how deep immersion generates the powerful psychological state of flow. We have explored the exhausting reality of living in the shallow hum, and we have touched on the philosophical necessity of finding meaning through deep craftsmanship. Do not view this as a rigid productivity system. This is a fundamental reorientation of how to experience time. The goal is not to eliminate every single shallow task from existence. That is impossible. The goal is to realize that the shallow tasks do not matter, and they certainly do not deserve the best hours of human consciousness. In the coming week, there is one concrete observation you can make. Notice the exact moment when a task becomes slightly difficult or uncomfortable. Notice the sudden, incredibly strong urge to escape that difficulty by looking at a screen or checking a message. That urge is the mind trying to flee the effort required for depth. When you feel that urge, do not judge it. Just notice it. Then, deliberately choose to stay with the difficult task for just 5 more minutes. Let the attention settle. Let the mind stretch. The things that matter in this life require everything we have. They demand our absolute presence. They ask us to step away from the shallow noise and dive into the quiet, demanding deep. When we finally do, the world stops feeling fragmented and terrifying. It begins to feel solid, significant, and deeply whole. What is the single most demanding task in your day that you can fully surrender your attention to without a single distraction?